Hi, my name's Robyn Sickler, and I'm welcoming you all to the Break It Down show. Wanted to say something about this podcast that I love. I love Pete. I love Jon. Known them forever. I think I've known Pete since 4th grade. And Jon, I've known for about the last 25 years. So super proud of them and everything they've accomplished with this podcast. Wish them much success in the future and ongoing. Speaking to, fascinating people around the world that they've been able to bring in and bring their stories to all of us. So I really appreciate everything they've done. Want to introduce my guest, which is Merrick Hughes. And he is responsible for some of our favorite music from back in the day, especially Tears for Fears, Adam and the Ants, and also Adam Ant's solo career as well. We're going to talk about new wave in general and how this genre has hopefully affected all of us that grew up in that era. Me especially. I can remember going and seeing Tears for Fears' final concert at the Concord Pavilion before they stopped touring as Tears for Fears, and loved their music. I think it's going to be a fascinating episode. And again, welcome to Chris. Also want to plug my charity, National Kidney Foundation. So any of you who know me know that I am a living kidney donor. And so this is a charity that is close to my heart. As you may or may not know, the National Kidney Foundation is the largest, most comprehensive and longstanding patient-centric organization that's dedicated to the awareness, prevention, and treatment of kidney disease in the United States. My story with my kidney donation was I gave my kidney almost 11 years ago now to a work colleague, and both of us are thriving. He's thriving, I'm thriving. You only need one kidney to do your thing and to live a happy life. So everyone needs to donate if you can. Medical, the cost of medical for kidney disease is a huge suck on the American insurance world as far as medical costs go. There are about 37 million adults in the United States that are estimated to have chronic kidney disease, and approximately 90% of those people don't even know they have it. So it's 1 in 3 adults that are at risk, and risk factors include diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, and obesity. So, and a family history of it. So if you can go to the kidney.org and click on the donate tab, you can learn more about becoming a living donor yourself. And if kidneys aren't your thing, you can also go to Save the Brave, my second favorite charity, at savethebrave.org and participate in supporting that mission by clicking donate as well. So with that being said, here is Chris and Pete, and enjoy the show.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl Ames.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hi, this is Merrick Hughes, and you guys are watching Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Man, this is so cool. I was just telling you that it's just such a treat to be able to talk with you again today. I love it. You're a busy dude, scheduled between you and me, but we've got you back on the show, and I'm so happy about that.
Yeah.
Jon was going to be here, but Jon has a big boy job where he builds homes for people.
Okay.
And he wanted me to tell you, because, Jon's a drummer, right? And since we've last spoken, he's in a British second wave invasion band. They're called the Uncommonwealth.
Brilliant.
And, and so they play, a variety of songs. And one of the things is, and as a drummer, this is his question to you, is they're playing Everybody Wants to Rule the World, which you're a co-writer on. And he's like, I'm getting carpal tunnel from playing this song at speed. Any shortcuts?
There aren't any. No. It is. John, it is what it is. You got to sit on a hi-hat and, it
just is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is, There's no easy fix,
Yeah. Which brings me to another question. Their band is so great because they'll play, Midnight Oil. They'll play a lot of songs, but they won't go straight to the hits. They'll play the next, like the second cut or whatever, and it's just fantastic. Like they're playing some Echo and the Bunnymen, which don't get played out live nearly enough, Yeah. And it made me wonder when I think about in the context of the times, what is new wave? Because there's some songs that are new wave, but there's not even keyboards in those songs. Like, what would you say from then? What is it?
It's really hard to say because new wave in America seemed to be kind of a different thing from new wave in the UK. I think. You know, I'm just trying to think. I mean, let's talk about. Give me a band that you'd say was new wave in the States.
I think Modern English, Melt With You. That song is like, bam, tent pole holder for new wave form.
Okay, that's about right. Yeah, that's about right. But it's had, the thing about new wave, it's had everything before it that it can build on. Yeah. It understands the nature of synths. It understands the nature of punk, hard rock. It's a kind of intelligent amalgam of those things, really, isn't it? It's a sort of an evolved musical state,
I like it. And then there's a lot of bands that were punk, were new wave, they were something. I mean, like when I was listening to The Police, I was listening to new wave music. I didn't realize I was listening to prog rock until later,
Yeah. Well, it was very sophisticated. I mean, it was prog, but it wasn't so prog that you didn't, the pop element and the kind of just that gentle rock thing. It was all in there. But I mean, the Police were ferocious live. I mean, they knew what they were doing, and you weren't sitting there thinking, "Well, this is just a prog wig out." I mean, it's always been songs based, but with that ability to go flying off and doing a bit of, hardcore progness, But amazingly talented band, the width of their work's phenomenal,
Yeah, would you say? I always think about like the bands that note for note are the strongest ever, and they've got to be up there with the songs they put out, the 60 or so songs that they put out. There's just not much swinging and missing there.
No. Their canon is pretty packed. It's full, I mean, phenomenal group, And they,
the other thing I wanted to
most people around the world would accept that, and they'd acknowledge that fact,
I was going to ask you too about Adam and the Ants, because you were in the band and everything. And actually, just so everybody knows, I live about 20 minutes from Disneyland, where there's a funny story where Chris and the band were there one day and they bought pirate hats. We have in our house a pirate hat, and I was going to put some eyeliner on for you and just kind of yuck it up a little bit. But
it was slightly dumber than pirate hats. It was like, instead of it being like the hat that Adam wears these days, which is pretty cool, kind of, if it was Johnny Depp, but it'd be that kind of pirate hat thing. Yeah, that's wonderful. But the hats we bought, they were dumb. They were like cabin boy hats. They were like striped kind of deckhand hats. They looked, they were pretty dumb. And I think if I remember right, we were playing the Roxy, I think. And
that's hilarious.
And at a strategic moment, we put these dumb hats on and then plowed our way into a tune, And as I remember, Adam didn't know. He didn't know that we bought these dumb hats.
Yeah.
So we just kind of put them on at a certain point, and he looked at us like, "What are you guys doing?" He couldn't. There was that little place where it wasn't sure whether it was like, all in the nature of things, or whether it was a little bit of a ruse, a bit of a take. But very funny moment. He thought it was funny afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to this new wave conversation, certain bands that were new wave back then, you listen to them now, and they're really just not. Like the Go-Go's were just a straight up rock and roll band, just fronted by chicks. But because of the lady part, maybe that kind of knocked them out of the traditional, 4/4 time rock and roll signature. But when I listen to them now, and I'm like, this is a band with strong grooves, and I wouldn't put them in the new wave genre anymore. But I'm not a producer.
But that's classically the case. Retrospectively, you can look at things and say, well, that band were regarded as this, but in fact, what they were doing was that. And I think that what you can miss when looking back is the attitude at which things were done with. So you could take one punk band and you think, oh, this is ferocious. This is really has the attitude, has the energy, and it's great. And another punk band you could hear and you think, well, that's just speeded up bad rock and roll.
Right.
So there's always this place where you can look at it and go, yeah, but it meant something then because of the nature in which it was delivered and the attitude of the people involved,
Yeah, I think the look matters. I mean, like you guys in Adam and the Ants,
Yeah.
I would put you in one of the genres for sure. I think is new wave because it wasn't the Who, it wasn't
Correct.
Rolling Stones.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it was a whole generation later, at least. So yeah,
right.
It wasn't.
But those guys were still putting out relevant music. I mean, when you guys were crossing over each other.
Yeah.
I mean, the Who was almost done, but
yeah. But the thing is, the bands that at that point, I mean, they were aware of and influenced by bands like the Who and Pink Floyd.
Right.
I mean, there was an amazing exhibition in London it was a sort of retrospective Pink Floyd. It was massive. And they had lots of, Gilmour's guitars and all sorts of things on show. But one of the funniest bits was a T-shirt, which was like a Johnny Rotten T-shirt, which had "I hate" in pen on top of a Pink Floyd T-shirt. And it was like that, we're punks, we hate, everything that's established and gone before. And yet this was one of the finest moments in the Pink Floyd exhibition, was Johnny Rotten sort of saying how awful they were and this big gesture. But in point of fact, and he said subsequently that they were a great band. But there was an approach to not liking those bands for a certain set of reasons. And I think that whole move towards something new and something fresh and post-punk, new wave came up, and it wasn't so adamant and so aggressive, but it wasn't old wave, it was just a fresher take by younger people. That's the thing.
That's a great way of looking at it, because it is an attitude, it is a look, it can be a sound. You know it for sure when you hear it, but a lot of it didn't necessarily sound like that. Like I'm thinking about, well, just for example, no one says this anymore, but for a while, Van Halen had a lot of influence from the punk scene, and there was some new wave elements because they had the keyboards and these kind of approaches. But you would never say they were a new wave band, but they're not a new wave band,
I mean, in the case of Van Halen, they're an incredibly talented and competent group, and they would have been looking at different influences and different ideas. Mm-hmm. If you take Jump. The whole nature of that keyboard attack, that's not standard old school rock and roll. That's definitely got elements of new, fresh idea. Polyphonic synthesizers, when they came out playing chords, that all came into rock, and that became a part of new wave. It's a different, it's a different take on. Maybe the chords were the same, but they weren't being played on guitar.
No, there's that's great. The chords are being played.
A part of this is to do with how much you're experimenting.
When you look at that,
Van Halen were, they were prepared to experiment. And Aerosmith, there's plenty of bands that are kind of, if you will, come from an older stable, but have stayed with a younger attitude and been incredibly inventive.
Yeah, when you look at the bands of that era, you can quickly get severely disparate. Like the Van Halen is, mid-70s. Susie and the Banshees is mid-70s. U2 is mid-70s. Yeah. None of these three bands are akin to the other. They're all so wildly different.
Yeah. And if you think about the 80s, you may think of, bands like XTC, but obviously they were active in the 70s. At the beginning of the 80s, they were a band that should have had more recognition for being in the 80s. But at the end of it, you've got bands like Stone Roses.
Yeah.
That's an 80s band.
Yeah.
But it's an amazing width of music across a decade,
What would you put as a home genre for XTC? I mean, they did not follow the rules much at all.
No, they really didn't. Very difficult. I mean, I love those guys. Their records are phenomenal. I mean, the level of invention. But they were a kind of a four-piece, post-Beatles, intelligent pop rock song. I mean, they were songwriters. Just about all their output is pretty straightforward, beautifully arranged songs. It's not like they sort of went wigging out and had long guitar solos or did anything, in a live field, which was like an extension of what they did. Their compositions were very pop based. Hard to classify, really. A phenomenally important group in my book.
Yeah, and I was just looking up on them. It happened to the other day. They're from early in the 70s, like 71 or 72. They got started.
Yeah, they were around doing stuff. Yeah, earlier than most people realize. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. When a band like this comes to you, or someone like Elvis Costello comes to you and says, "Hey, Chris, I want to make a record. You're my guy." How do you get in the saddle with those guys and either guide them or write? How does that work? Because Elvis also doesn't abide genre. He'll do country, he'll do blues, he'll do everything.
I was asked this the other day, and I think the key thing is, if you've got an artist or a band that are quite established and they know how to make records and they want to make a different record, they want to experiment or try a different palette or just to have a different attitude towards making a record, and they think, well, maybe we'll speak to this guy. It's about a relationship. Quite early on, you establish whether or not the ideas that you might both have would make sense. Sometimes you meet bands and you discuss things and you think, no, that band's never going to get an approach that I might offer. And similarly, some bands will go, no, that's never going to work. He doesn't come from that place. And other times you meet people and you're surprised at how open-minded they are. And they'll say, yeah, of course, we'll try synths and a concrete mixer, whatever it is. Some people are very open-minded and they will discuss and they will commune.
And then what about your end of it where you're like, yeah, this isn't a fit for what I do and what I can. I mean, you guys are all pros, so it's like if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But how do you know that with an established band that can do anything that it's just not a good fit?
You can have a suspicion that a band that have been very successful doing what they do the way they do it, you can get a suspicion that they may have the width to try something different. And you meet them and it's a perfect fit against all the odds. And other times you think this on paper should be perfect, but you meet up and discuss, and it for reasons doesn't work out. And
then once you're in the studio, you're still against the odds. Like to actually produce music that's going to be relevant, that's going to matter, that's going to serve the band's canon. Yeah. That's also quite hard too, because you can do world-class work in the studio and you and I both know, like, I don't know, it should have worked. It didn't.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, and sometimes you can work with a bunch of guys or a bunch of people that are great and you get on and everything makes sense. And the record just turns out in a certain way and isn't successful or doesn't quite work. And yet, in theory, that's a perfect match. That should be great, but it doesn't work. And it's really hard to know. I mean, you do your best to try and make a record make sense. Sometimes it's elusive, and other times it's accidentally. Some things come together and you think, I'm amazed that was as popular or as successful as it was, So,
that you have to go create it so that you can see what kind of legs the music has.
Yeah.
But I wonder, like, when you've been writing songs since 1972 or whatever it is, XTC has been more popular in the past than they are right now. If they came out with an all-new album and it was literally the best work they had ever done, at least they were so confident. If you're the producer, you're so confident. Why is it that bands that have been around a long time, why is it so hard for them to get over that relevance bar to the wide populace again? Is it just, do you settle into your audience and even if the music truly is better, I don't explain that to me. Can you at all?
It's a really good question and a really difficult question to answer. I mean, I think that if you have a band that's been around for a long, long time and they've got fans that have grown with them, they may do shows and a lot of people turn up to see their shows and it's a private party. It's like the band are there and all the fans love it, or they love the music. They have a great evening. But whether that notionally translates to people who know little about that group, who have suddenly become aware of that group, thinking, well, yeah, it's nice, but it's not really speaking for me. So it's very hard sometimes for, like when you see the Stones live now, phenomenal though they are, and all their history is phenomenal, and how creative and inventive they've been, they're kind of doing a kind of greatest hits show now. So it's not. I mean, it's phenomenal. Don't get me wrong. They're an amazing band, but it's not cutting edge in terms of a music that you might know your colours to. If you're a young person trying to establish what they think about music and what their own musical identity is, I'd be surprised if the Stones did that for young people now. Although I could be wrong. I mean, they're a phenomenal band.
Yeah, and they have aged through generations, but it's primarily on Satisfaction and songs that are 50 years old. They have kept
going, and they have done great work all the way through.
For sure.
It's not that I'm saying I'm not one of these people that says the Stones have fizzled out, but what I'm saying is when they do shows, it's an amazing event of all their work, and of which masses of it are big hits. So it's it's a 2-hour show or 2.5-hour show of fun hits.
Yeah, I mean, they fill stadiums on the road, and when they tour, they are officially the biggest, tour ever. They are great.
They are a world human phenomenon. They just are,
Yeah. But they don't have the cred inside the industry specifically. Like when you talk about the greatest bands in the world, you could name 5 bands before you're like, oh, we have to include the Stones. But you're never like, oh my God, the Stones. What do you attribute that to? And again, this is not in any way a knock against the Stones, but there is something about them that's missing.
I think also you two have fallen into that camp now. You two used to be a phenomenally important group. And although they are a massive group and they can do massive sales and have huge concerts, they're not as vital to the society. They're not as vital to the culture as they were. And I haven't actually answered your question. I'm still looking at that going, why is that?
Yeah.
The Beatles, you can't speak about them because they broke up, so they're not trading quite the same way. It's very hard to know.
There's something to be said for leaving some money on the table. Like Jimi Hendrix is better than he was because we're all like, look at what he could have done, and we give him a lot of credit for that.
Oh, yeah. Well, he died a legend.
Right. Yeah, there was no reinvention period for him. He was still inventing, and then we lost him.
He was still on fire when he went. He was still great.
We've been talking a lot about a lot of new wave, that kind of bands, that kind of thing. But I'm interested in that because we're just now starting to, in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and other places, starting to recognize the importance of the Smiths and the Cure and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
And then Stevie Nicks just has a hit, or Fleetwood Mac has a hit come back to life because some guy rides a skateboard and drinks some ocean spray cranberry juice. So you never know when something can come back as a massively important cultural phenomenon. It's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, some things just have a longevity. You can't put your finger on why. Maybe there was a little moment in time when someone that's doing an advert remembers a piece of music from their youth and applies it to an advert, and it works. It's really hard to know what piece of music might be influential to the people that might put that music in a different frame. Very hard to know.
Is that even an attainable goal? I mean, can you go in? Okay, U2, sure, they can spend money on being great because they can fund it themselves. But, the standard band goes into studio, you're just trying to get out good songs and then sort of let it stick. Is that, maybe I'm downplaying that, but what do you think?
I think that there's been, across time, there's been a kind of devaluation of the album. I mean, there's a lot of people I know that do promote the album, and there's sort of album listening parties, and there's a couple of great shows in Britain where a DJ will put a whole album on, and people will phone in and comment and say, "Wow, I didn't realize this was so great. I usually cherry pick and don't listen to albums, and it's amazing that et cetera, et cetera." So I think the nature of the album and the way an album was A&R'd, record company would be very influential on how an album was constructed, perhaps what songs were being used, what the running order was, and there was a kind of a science more than an art form to ending up with an album that had a commercial potential. A lot of records these days are made by artists, perhaps in their bedrooms on laptops. And some of those albums are very, very successful, but they're not done in the same way. And so that whole nature of being in a studio where everybody, record company, everybody's focused on it being a smash hit album, I think on some level, a lot of that's gone. I don't think
that artistry of being in the studio for hours, downtime where you're just kind of noodling and everything.
Yeah.
If you're by yourself, and I've told you we do these album fight things, and here's what I learn a lot of times is when you compare an album to another album, song for song, song one versus song one, and you look at what's better, I've noticed that even the greatest musicians ever, Stevie Wonder is guilty of this. Yeah. If they're left alone to produce and play their own things, it's very easy to get self-indulgent and just have a song, just have too much fat on it. And I'm not in any way criticizing Stevie Wonder's professional ability, but you can hear it when you compare it to something that's lean and tight. You're like, this is wonderful. It's made from Stevie Wonder, but someone should have been in the room to check him up and go, less.
Yes, that is a very good example of what I was attempting to discuss. It doesn't matter whether you're starting off or well established. You can make a record and it can be wrong based on the fact that you're missing, someone else's view on it. And some artists will have a couple of close friends they'll play their record to, and their friends will say, well, not quite sure. But there's skilled people that can go in and say, well, from the ground up, perhaps the rhythm of that isn't great. Perhaps we could try a few other things and try and bring the level of creativity up. And that's essentially what I try and do. Look at all the aspects. Are we really getting the best out of this bass part? Whatever it is, just have a little look at trying to improve the nature of it. Is the thing swinging well? Has the thing got the right backbeat? Is it the right tempo? What key are we in? How does the singer deal with it? All those things are questions that you constantly scan and try and make sure they're at their best, at their optimum level. So that's part of what you do when it comes to producing. And an artist can be in the midst of that and go, yeah, this is great. Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out that bridge isn't good. I always thought I was sort of getting away with it, but I was never sure. So, let me go off and write something better. So you kind of try and raise the bar the whole time. And I think most artists and musicians appreciate that because you're kind of doing it for them to make a better record.
Yeah. And there may be, in general, these kind of things, like once you bring it up, the person can go, and I know you've heard this, but they're like, you know what? Yeah, I'm not in love with it either. But they hadn't thought to push it. They were afraid to push it. You don't want to be the guy going, hey, my part is not the best. It's hard to do that.
A lot. If you work with a band and you say, guys, the track's good, but we get to this point, it kind of loses steam or energy, and we need to look at that. And then someone will say, oh, yeah, great. I'm glad we're looking at that because I never felt my part was that good, And so, you just identify areas of places in a track where you think, yeah, that could be better. That guy's treading water. He could be doing something more inventive.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think absolutely. And this is not to knock the person in their garage, working on a computer, making music.
No.
But there is that help, that community process of, in my mind, if I was to be in a garage making my own music on a computer, I would be very A to B focused. I need to lay a drum track today. And that would be my focus. And I would fiddle with it and get it to where I was happy with it. But there wouldn't be that toughening process. That person, when, here comes Chris going, that drum track is, not it.
Yeah.
Do it again. Do it again.
Why isn't it as good as it could be? And, one doesn't have to be, over forceful or unpleasant about it. It's most people will know. If you draw attention to something, you think, well, this is okay, but I'm thinking it's 3 or 4 BPM too slow. What do you think? Let's have a little listen to it fast. Let's play it faster. And, a large amount of the time, an answer would go, yeah, actually, you got a point. Yeah, I never realised. I always thought it was okay. And another thing that happens is sometimes singers will write a song and they'll have written it and sung it in their bedroom, and it'll all make sense. And then you get into the studio and you think, well, they're not projecting. They're not singing out. They're kind of singing it like they were, looking at their guitar. And it should be being sung for somebody. Not always, but I mean, that's an example.
Right.
Sometimes that intimacy, actually, what I'm describing, that intimacy can be absolutely fine. But there are times when you think, no, this can project more. Come on, let's get this saying something.
Some of the songs that come out of studio sessions, too, that are just gifts. U2 calls it When God Enters the Room or whatever. And you get a song like That's Entertainment from the Jam. I think that was written in like 11 minutes first take. Every Day I Write the Book from Elvis Costello, where it's like the song just arrives, Use a U2 example. When they do a Moment of Surrender, Brian Eno had screwed up a drum track and he was playing it trying to fix it because he was like, and then Larry happens to walk in and it's like, okay. And then he starts strumming and then this song just is downloaded from the ether from something that wasn't supposed to happen. And we definitely miss out on that if you're working on a computer only and don't have a physical instrument and people around you to play off of your accidental inspiration.
That accidental inspiration is always wonderful. It's, in the studio, and you can see it rise up in the room. Like someone will hit a couple of different chords, and you think, that's so wonderful. That could be a whole middle eight structure for this. And then something else happens, and there's another accident or another sort of misunderstanding, and something else evolves. Those moments are magical for me. When you end up with something greater than, not some of the parts, but greater than the initial idea, or different. You just think, well, I hadn't imagined it turning out like that, but that's superb, Do
you have any examples of that?
In stuff I've done, quite a lot of times where someone will say, I could play it on this keyboard, and someone's misheard and been doing something else on a guitar, and you just think, oh, hold on a second, that's quite a mutant kind of version of what I'm doing here. Let's focus on that. So it happens a lot where things kind of they just kind of fall into place without too much to do. I mean, we're talking about it. Obviously, we're sort of trying to describe the nature of it, but it's much more sort of ethereal than that. Quite often, some things just arrive, and you just grab them. You just think, that's it. That's what we need. And it could be as vague as someone putting on a double track on a vocal that suddenly comes to life. You just think, that's expressing it beautifully.
I get because I have a show. We talk about music sometimes. People will send me their tracks, and and I'm no producer at all, but I sort of speak the language now after talking to a bunch of you guys.
Well,
and I'll send it.
I have to say, talking to you, I think you probably do have that kind of mind where it's sort of somewhat analytical, but somewhat, exposed to beauty, and you're just swept by it, I mean, I can get really carried away by the nature of how well something's going, where the beauty starts to come up, and I'll try and hold on to it. And come on, guys, we can make this amazing. I love all that,
Yeah, and when I give this feedback, it's often pretty straightforward because, I can't always explain why I'm hearing things. But recently a guy sent me a song about his addiction and his conquering over it and everything else. And it was a trap-based song. And I'm like, I hear your influences, but I don't hear you. Give me a female doubling your voice to create some tension in what, a partner that's singing with you as someone who's impacted by your addiction. And he's like, yeah, but is it good? And I'm like, well, it's the beginning of something good. Keep working at it.
It has every chance of being good, but perhaps you could consider, here's a couple of things about it that could be better. And then you could look at that. It's a process. It's pointless just to say that someone's work is no good. It doesn't help anyone. And it's not the truth, And it's really not being helpful. But you can listen to someone's. I mean, I get sent demos and ideas all the time, and people say, "What do you think of this?" Or "Is this any good?" Or "What's wrong with this?" And you listen to it, and you know, there's usually something positive you can come with that might lead the recording or the track or the song to be more than it is now. You know, words of encouragement, always. Yeah, keep going. You know, perhaps you could consider a more forceful way of singing it, or it needs to come out to play a bit more. It's a little bit sort of, it's okay. It does all the right things, but there's never a point in this song that goes, I just need that little bit of woof, woof, something to happen. And a lot of people will go, oh, yeah, I get that. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. Come on, I'll wake up a bit more. You know, I'll put more chest into it or whatever it is.
Yeah. So I always start off with, like, the first thing is you've made this incredible song. You clearly spent a lot of time on it. And these things matter. You're in the game. You're playing the game. So keep playing the game.
Yes.
Here's what I think that, you know, going forward. And one of the things I also like to say is, you know, like you put a lot in when it's appropriate. You've poured your heart and soul into these lyrics. Yeah. What if you said it in less? Like, think about Little Wing is not even 100 words long, you know? And so if you can find the right words, the right combination, you know, could you improve this lyric by making it shorter? You know, because longer is rarely the answer, you know, but.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you know what it's like. I mean, some of this is as much to do with psychology as it is to do with music. It's like sometimes you meet someone and they will seemingly express themselves with very few words, and it's all great. You don't get any piffle. You just kind of get the essence of the person. And that is a classic case of less being more, you know? The other one you get is where people will be shouting. And, you know, you can say, look, you're an important person here. You don't need to shout. People will listen to you. And it's a reminder that actually sometimes it can be calmer and less verbose, and you'll get more said. And that obviously applies in music.
I love that. In terms of podcasting, people ask me a lot of questions, and I always say, you have to slow down, you know, and then slow down doesn't just mean go slower. It means think more slowly, take time, leave pauses. And when you're going too slow, it's just speed up a little bit.
And breathe. You know, it's the little point. Yes. And breathe, reflect, and then, definitely. Yeah. That's definitely right. Yeah.
That microphone is such a powerful thing, and you're so impassioned to get your message out. It is very common to just overdo it and to blast people. And, you know, like it drives me a little bit crazy when a singer is singing all these things and you can't even understand what they're saying. And that's not just because I got blown up ears and, you know, I can't hear anything, but I'm desperate to know what you're talking about. Unless the song is like a groove song and the words are just rhythmical and everything. But if you're saying something, I really want you to say it so I can hear it.
I think sometimes you get a band that thinks they're expressing something in the way they're playing it, and they overplay and they try too hard, and you can hear it when a band are sort of trying too hard. And sometimes, you know, you ask guys, let's just stop a minute. It feels like that you're striving for something and we're not achieving it. Let's just pull this back a bit and see whether it can come in a slightly more mellow way. And I'm not suggesting turn it into sort of a granddad tune. I'm just saying sometimes it's kind of got too much, you know, fizz and too much flailing about. And nothing's connecting. Nothing's landing beautifully. And sometimes you can just calm it back and it'll actually have much more, weirdly, it'll have much more rage if it's not over flailing. And you can see it in bands.
There's a great lyric Willie Nelson does during Redheaded Stranger, the album, and he talked about how, like, he tried not to kill his wife and her lover. He's like, I tried. He's like, and I think he says it 3 times, where like he really fought with himself to not deal with it, but and it's so much more angry knowing that he thought about it and just said, nope, I'm going to kill these people.
Yeah. Yeah. This is considered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fantastic thing when you think about those elements. Do you think about the audience too? Like if you're on the board and you're leaning in and you're like, oh, like you can feel it. Are you thinking about what the audience is getting and trying to give them some more of what they need? Or is that not really in the room with you when you guys are doing this stuff?
It can be. It can be. It depends on the nature of the piece of music. I mean, when you go and see a live show, some of the pieces that are being played are, although it's a big gathering, are intimate. And it's a moment where the artists might be playing and the artists are expecting the audience to sort of listen and feel it and absorb perhaps the intimacy of it or the delicacy of it or how fragile it is. And there's been another track where the band are wanting to get the audience up and smashing the place up. So it depends which style of music in the studio you're working on. You hope that if it's an intimate, calm piece, that it's articulate enough for people to grasp. If it's a thumping track, then you want it, you want it to rock. And I can be at a board thinking, this is great, but it just isn't moving, just isn't right yet, And that can be something that you never get right, or, you go off and have a cup of tea and come back and go, oh, it's obvious. The drums were too loud. They're knocking everything flying. You can reflect back on why something isn't working for you, And the other thing, obviously, what happens is you can be sitting there working on something and going, it's almost there, but it's just not great. And other people can come in and go, you're crazy, man. This is fantastic. You yourself are kind of over-obsessing about it. It's great. It's great. It's done. It's rare, but that can happen. But you kind of miss something because you tried too hard.
And then is there also like the time when
that's part of overproduction, and in learning how to produce, you will get a load wrong, and you will overproduce things, and you will make some hideous records as a result of learning your craft. You make mistakes all the time.
Yeah. The commonality of being able to produce music, and more, you have to have less of a command of music to make music, because the computer can help you do a lot of these things.
Yeah.
So we lose a lot of that elasticity of time. The imperfection, the wrong chord, the hammer-on that sneaks in.
Sure.
And you're like, wait, hold on, everybody stop. Do it this way again, and make that mistake part of the song. We do lose out from these things. What do we gain?
Brian Eno said in an interview, he'd be working on something, and there's such an ability with a computer and keyboard to alter the timing of something to get it perfect, or to get alter the pitch to get it perfect. And one's notion of perfect, I'm paraphrasing, he hasn't put it quite in this way, but I know exactly what he means. You can be focusing on a few bars where there were imperfections, and you can get it absolutely perfect, and you keep going. And by the end of it, you've made the whole track perfect, and you've lost everything. You've over perfected it, and it's far from perfect at that point. It's like it's lost its pulse, it's lost its lifeblood.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah.
And it's lost its mistaking hammer on and a pitch bend that's just south of the notes. Missed all that, and you've lost a massive part of expression.
Yeah, whenever I think about that kind of thing and timing and everything, I always think about Hot Fun in the Summertime by Sly and the Family Stone. And everybody sort of just gets in when they can because it's too hot to be on time,
Yes, yeah. There's various, it's so odd. And it's wonderful that music can be all of these things. A few years ago, I was at a festival in Bristol. And the festival site was kind of on a hill. And down in the bottom of the hill was classic festival stage, analog bands, people tapping mics to see that they were on, and people thumping bass drums to make sure it all sounded good, doing all of that. And, bands playing through their show. And it was great. Up the hill was a dance tent, which was just rock solid, banging. And that was the pulse of the afternoon. You could hear this the whole afternoon. And everyone in the dance tent was absolutely on one. It was the most focused, perfect. Everything was in tune. Everything was on time. Amazing. And it's a funny thing to witness that and go, yeah, this is so direct. This is so powerful. And yet I grew up watching the bands down the hill, thinking they were doing all the expression. And it's just a different side of the brain. You know, they're both equally great.
Yeah.
Things being completely in time, drum machines, you know, with wicked timing. And then someone who's like got a bit of a drug problem playing the most amazing bit of guitar and it's all over the place. It's also phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all in there.
I went to Lollapalooza one year, and it was Deadmau5 playing or DJing, and then it was the Foo Fighters, and they were on adjacent stages, but the same field. And both bands had huge crowds, but the biggest crowd was the younger crowd on the Deadmau5 side. And it's interesting to see that where you have – it's almost like – and this is not a knock on the Foo Fighters. It's almost like that kind of music is no longer rock and roll. It's not anti-establishment. It's corporate, if anything else, you know, because you can hire them for any gig and then they'll rock it. But if Dave Grohl shows up at your house to date your daughter, you're like, oh, it's Dave. Oh, that guy's great. He has kids on stage all the time. But if Deadmau5 shows up, you're like, I don't know who you are. You're terrifying.
Yeah.
What drugs are in your pocket, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. From what culture have you come from and where did you land?
Yeah.
You know? But, I mean, both phenomenal.
Yeah. It is.
But there was a time, if you think back, there was a time when people were saying, oh, get that awful synth out of this record. It's watering it down. It's not rock. It's not powerful. And then you look now, and Deadmau5, synth, very powerful.
Yeah.
Prodigy.
Yeah.
My word.
Yeah. Yeah.
What an important group. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Get that synth out of here. Tell that to, Kraftwerk, you know, and they've been around since as long as anybody has been around and influenced everybody.
Yes, they're gods, they're founding fathers.
Yeah.
Kraftwerk, unbelievably important. Yeah.
Yeah. You know who we had on the show the other day? We had Susie Quattro on, and she hasn't made it over here at all. She's known for being a part-time player in Happy Days, the TV show. But over there, you know, she's it. She did it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Susie Quattro. And she's lovely. She's a lovely person. I met her when I was working on Robert Plant's record at RAC. Obviously, Susie is friends with Mickey Most and the whole British pop thing. And she was in the studio and she came by and said hello and she was absolutely listened to what we were doing. She was absolutely delightful, you know, amazingly hardworking, brilliant. But I guess it's one of those things where sometimes it works away from home, you know? Yeah. But yeah, people in this country think, yeah, Susie Quattro, great, you know? Yeah. Perhaps not young kids who might not know, but those that listen to music at all in Britain will be aware of Susie Quattro.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you front a band with the bass in your hand, you're after her, you know?
Yeah.
Yes. I told her she's element Q on the rock and roll chart because she's so early. You know, when they invented rock and roll, she was almost ready to be in it. She was just a little kid.
Yes. Yeah.
And she was the first.
With a great attitude. Amazing.
Yeah. She's fantastic. Hey, what are you working on right now?
Well, good question. Because of the COVID thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of it. It's this kind of.
It's a little thing I heard. The measles.
That sweep in the oceans. I'm working less in the studio, but I'm doing sort of collaborations online. So I'm doing an album with a guy called Charlie Jones, who indeed is a bass player. I mean, he's a composer, but he's a bass player. Played bass with Robert Plant and Jimmy Page when they did their thing post-Zep. So I'm working on his second solo album, and I'm working on a Lloyd Cole album, which has been something. Lloyd was going to come over and do some singing here and do some work here at my studio, but because of COVID, that's not really been possible. So we're just doing a lot of stuff online, and he's sending me things he's been writing, and so that's a quite a long process, but very enjoyable. So those are two album projects I'm on. I'm also sort of, if you like, over-shouldering more than producing. My good friend Jack Hughes from Wang Chun, he's been working on a lot of solo work, and although you know, and I speak to him quite a lot, and he sends me songs he's working on. What do you think of this? I've just done some editing for him. I keep a keen interest in his work because it's so great. So I've been doing that and working on my own another album for me.
Oh, nice.
I've just done one. I've just finished one of the tracks from it, which is quite obtuse, really. It's called Remembrance. And it's being released on December the 11th, so it'll be up on Spotify. And it's almost like a John Cage piece, really. It's a recording and additional bits of piano and effects we have a Remembrance Sunday here in London on the 11th of November every year, and it's a kind of strange mutant version of that event. So within it, there's 2 minutes of silence because it's about, you know, those that fell in the wars and you know, for our servicemen around the world and servicewomen around the world. So it's a kind of a piece remembering the fallen, but it's also slightly not thrilled with the fact that we have war at all. So there's a kind of duality in it, but it's a 4-minute piece of something I did. So that's getting released on December the 11th, and the album will be coming at some point middle of next year, I think.
Yeah, that's Remembrance Day is when you guys all wear the poppies on your lapels.
Correct. Yeah, it's exactly that.
Yeah. Yeah, we call that Memorial Day, and we get drunk and have barbecue.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, I think Remembrance here is quite a somber thing. And, you know, I'm the older I get, the more I'm aware of how many people did lose their lives or were injured or had their lives changed. And you know, on one hand, I'm massively respectful for all the people that have gone, and obviously some that are still alive. But I'm also massively not thrilled with the state of our leaders around the world. They strike me as quite a damaged bunch, and it's people like that that are prone to making war. You know, so it's very, very simple. It's like, of course, massive respect for those that gave so much,
right?
And somewhat of a not disrespect, but like a jaundiced look at those that have caused war. That's my feeling about it. So
I mean, I think it's appropriate.
Sorry?
I mean, I'm a veteran, and I agree with you. Like, we go too often. We're not willing to pay the price up front. And then we go and wreck people's lives and homelands and nations.
Yeah.
To what end? And like, we just don't reliably fix what we break. And it's never, if we could focus on poverty, everybody would be a lot better off. If we were able to reliably lift people out of extreme poverty, that would be a better goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Remembrance Day though. So that comes out when this month?
Yeah, it's December the 11th. It's just a little tune that will be popped up. Well, I say tune. It's well, you have to hear it.
Yeah, well, I'll put that in the show notes so people can check it out. It'll be on Spotify as well, right?
Yeah, it's on Spotify. Yeah, it starts with piano and it ends with well, if I can just spend a little bit more time talking about this,
please.
The Tower of London had an exhibition, and it was basically a whole sea of poppies. They were like ceramic. And there was a poppy for everyone who died. And they had, at a certain time of the day, they had people coming out and reading the names of soldiers that had died. And so every evening they were trying to get through a list of everyone that had died. And they'd read a certain amount out each evening. And I was there on one of the occasions this happened. And when they'd finished, there was a lot of people around, and they all applauded. They all clapped, but it wasn't. It was a very. It's rather like how you don't clap in church. It's kind of, there was a sort of moment where everyone felt quite taken by this, but nevertheless there was this applause, and it didn't have any yelling in it or anything kind of explosive. It was very calm, and it's actually a lot of people clapping incredibly softly. And I was so taken by it, I actually started recording it. And so at the end of the piece, it's a recording of the people that were around me applauding the names that were being read out. So it's kind of a strange way. It feels like it's the end of a live piece of music, but it so isn't. But anyway, it ends with.
I love that.
It ends with a.
Wycliffe Jean talks about how in Haiti there's music everywhere. Yeah. It's the birds, it's the, and the natural ambient sounds of their world really for him becomes music all the time.
Yeah. He's right. Yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a tone at the train station. I think it's Gare de l'Est in Paris. I think it's Gare de l'Est. But just like we're going to make it like bong bong, but it's so rhythmic to me. And I'm like, it's absolutely the beginning of a techno song and then a motif that runs the whole thing. If I had the ability to do it, I would do it.
Have you recorded it?
No, because the last time I was there, it was a long time ago before, like, you could just hold your phone in the air and hear it. But I'm like, it's stuck in my head for years because it was just so perfect for some kind of rhythmic song.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's still there, if that bing bong is still there, maybe we can get someone to record it for you.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be neat. Yeah. And then turn it into something.
Yeah.
Who do you want to work with? I mean, you've worked with, so many, you just talked about so many names already, but who's out there that you're dying to get in the studio with?
Okay. So we were talking earlier about bands and various things, but a lot of the people that I really admire don't need producers. Bizarrely, having discussed all that, there's people that, there are so many bands that maybe they do have producers, maybe they have engineers that are incredibly helpful and help that process along. But I get the impression there's a lot of bands that or artists that don't really need a producer. I'll give you an example. Beck.
Yeah.
He strikes me as someone that's just so musically capable and competent and knows what he's doing and super talented that, he doesn't really need a producer. He may have producers. There may be people that he works with that help him, but I get the impression that he's one of those guys that can make a record just off his own bat. So there's quite, bands like Sonic Youth, for example. I could be wrong, but I get the impression they kind of know what they want to do.
Yeah, yeah.
It's those sort of bands and those sort of acts that I sit and listen to and get excited by. Frank Black's another guy. I mean, he knows what he's doing. So the people I'd like to work with these days are people that wouldn't want to work. They'd be doing it anyway. So
right, they're already doing it, yeah.
The question should be, what pile of bands would you like to sit in the studio at the back and watch? That would be fun.
So do you see your job now then less as someone on the cutting edge of art and like defining new sounds and more of a guide to get a band from this point to the next point? Is that more of your job now? Like you're like a guide for, you're still going up Everest, right? But you're taking 4 newer climbers and taking them up this impossible journey. Is that a characterization of it?
There is much more of a sense of there's quite a few ways we could go on this record. It could be like this. We could try that. I like the approach we've got here. That's worth pursuing. Let's keep going this way. There is more of that sense of keep going. This is good. Yeah. Whereas perhaps in the old days, I would be much more wanting to sort of invest in it in a different way. I'd want perhaps, guys, we must try this synth, this particular preset I've been working on. It's this could work, and wanting to sort of put a sound or a statement or some kind of nuance in there, because that's somewhat the artistic side of things. These days, I'm less bothered about having to have a certain bass sound or a certain synth part or a certain guitar element that I might have brought to the party. It's more likely to be, let's get this conversation with that harp and that guitar and see what that sounds like. So it's shifted, I'm much more likely to relax about things that I might not like or would do a certain way, but work. It doesn't have to be about me liking it, but it probably has to be a bit about me thinking what's being done is being done well. I don't know if that makes.
No, it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
I want to talk about U2 again, because that's what I always do. They're my favorite band. But when they talk about how they make songs, a good idea has to be able to withstand quite a bit of challenge. And to go so far as Brian Eno saying, grab that dobro, grab that microphone and play it that way. And then see if the song can fight its way through these ideas and get it to where it needs to be. Yeah. Do you have things like that? Like grab this dobro and play it again, or, let's try it this way.
There many times I can think of examples where the song isn't really formed properly and it's got loads of decoration, loads of things fizzing around, and it's all doing an impressive front end. And you can listen to it and you go, well, what? Hold on. What's the sentiment in this song? What are you trying to say? Can we just bring this down to just the piano?
Right. Just
sit and play the piano and sing the song. And let's find the truth in this song. And then when everything's paired off and you're listening to the nature of perhaps the melody and the nature of what the sentiment in the song, the lyric is, you can, at that point, you can go, okay, I still don't get what you're trying to say. Can we be more straightforward? Can we be more honest in the nature of what this song's about? And I can give examples. For example, talking to people about John Lennon writing "Don't Let Me Down." It's pretty obvious what he's singing about.
Right.
In the chorus, that's it. You get what he's saying. There's no mystery. It's what he's worried about and what he's saying, what he's thinking. And perhaps the song we're working on is couched too much. It's kind of avoiding the issue. What are you trying to say? Let's try and work on a way of just saying what you mean. And it's not always easy. Sometimes an artist will say, no, I want to be oblique. I want this to be, I don't want to wear it on my sleeve and say what it is. I want this for interpretation. This could be 5 or 6 different things. And we need to work on it being that vague and that obtuse and that weird and that, and at that point you're going, yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, interesting.
Let's look at making this vague, notional set of ideas cohesive and work in one song.
Yeah, I love songs like that can be interpreted by somebody completely different than somebody else. When they land, they're wonderful.
Sure.
You got time for one more real quick question?
Of course.
Okay, so one of the things we've discovered along the way here on the show, talking to a variety of producers and musicians, is that British folks sing soul so amazingly. And it's supposed to be this, like Black U.S. genre. But you guys have some wonderful non-Black, non-U.S. soul singers. How in the heck did that happen?
I think, that's a whole session in itself. But I think we had, there was a sort of European tradition of popular middle-of-the-road music. It was all pleasant and all very nice. And all of a sudden, we suddenly kept getting records from America They came in classically. They came in on the western side of Great Britain. So music came through, I suppose, through Cardiff and Bristol and Liverpool and Glasgow. I mean, there's more. I mean, I'm not going to give you the whole history of it.
Yeah, but those port towns.
Those port towns and music came in, and it was profound. And people who like music, if you will, a lot of white guys who were strumming away heard this phenomenal music and went, yeah, that's great, and kind of worked out how that worked. And, white soul singers evolved because of imitation. I think that's an amazingly crass, simplified version of it. But the essence of that is what happened. We were exposed to music from the Americas. And we thought it was great in the main. And it was appreciably more exciting and more for the youth than the kind of European kind of middle of the road light BBC music, that we had. I mean, you have to realize there were the pirate radio stations. They were a massive influence on music we got to hear. Radio Luxembourg, that was playing great music, and American Forces Network. Those radio stations, we got to hear stuff, and then records coming in from those ports. We were aware of a lot of great stuff, and there were a lot of people that imitated and sang that kind of stuff. I mean, the Beatles. There's no mystery. They and I'm not citing them as the best white soul singers, but they were so into Tamla Motown and urban music. The Rolling Stones, you listen to their early catalogue, it's full of black R&B stuff.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah,
and it's a sort of strange, white boy version of it. And what's even madder is that stuff that was the white boy version of it then went back to America.
Yes,
and was popular. So thank you for that. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for those great records to start with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like someone like Amy Winehouse, who's just dangerous in the way she sang, and you knew she was living over the edge. And then Adele and the pain that she brings, and they're just wonderful, wonderful singers. In their ability to do this, and it's absolutely like if you look, you're like, oh, they're that's our music. Why didn't we love it when why didn't we buy all the records here?
I know it's a well documented phenomenon, isn't it? The fact that something goes away, it gets presented back at you, and you can like it in a different way.
I wonder, is there someone who's doing a Peel session type thing anymore? I mean, those records were so important for so many bands, and went on for so long. I hope that someone is doing something like that still.
In terms of a DJ on radio.
DJ on radio having these sessions with these up and coming bands, or just any band who was anybody from that era was in the Peel session, and it's it's sought after. We have a John Peel stage at Glastonbury. I mean, it's acknowledged how important he was. But there are DJs, there's young DJs coming on playing alternative music, if you like, and giving young bands a chance. Yes. All right, I actually have another question if you have time.
Of course.
Okay, so when you think about the tentpole bands of punk, you think about a couple of bands. One of them is the Ramones.
Yeah.
And then one of them is the Clash. But the Clash is absolutely a punk band, but they're not a punk sound, right? They're all over the place.
I repeat my point earlier.
Yes.
They had a punk attitude.
Right.
Those guys had a way of approaching stuff, and they were also influenced by music that, there's reggae, there's all manner of stuff that's in the Clash mix. It's not like they were at any given point, we just make this kind of music, which is identified as punk music. They had a fantastic attitude, and their music grew from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you listen to the width of how that group's incredibly important. You listen to the width of what they did.
Yeah.
But I'd argue that their attitude about life and music and playing and social commentary and their culture and how they came about, I'm pretty certain they're fairly forceful, fearsome people about how, what they did and what they were about, So they're punk in that respect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they weren't just guys that were hoping to have a little bit of success in some little pop band. I mean, they were, I saw them at, Fulham Town Hall, and they were ferocious.
Yeah.
I remember the thing that struck me about the Clash is the fact that, all three of them just come to the front of the stage and start singing or shouting at you or whatever. And it was like, yes, wow, this is seriously powerful. Very, very impressive band. Very important, obviously, very important band.
And important in terms of, Joe Strummer's experience living abroad and just the overall attack of like all of these different social things that, like here in America, we wouldn't know about. I mean, Not only is it a European band, but, he's singing about all kinds of people in all kinds of places under the same kind of attack socially.
Yes. Well, I don't think he ever, I don't know for certain, but I don't think he ever lost, or the band ever lost, a sense of things they felt strongly about.
Right.
It's not weak music. It's strong and important and has value, And
then along comes Big Audio Dynamite. It's like Mick was like, you know what? I just want to have some parties and some fun and do this dance music.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't underestimate that stuff. It's really brilliant.
Oh, it is for sure. But it's just such a left turn, though.
Yeah, it's not the Clash in a certain vehemence sense, but it is really inspired music. Where he was at and who he was hanging with, and what the influences were. Yeah. Big Audio Dynamite, really important. Great records, I think.
Yeah,
very inventive.
We're actually going to have DC Lee on the show.
They're really classy records, and they're not slick. They're just really brilliantly made, I think.
Yeah. No, I love it. Or just when they would do a cover, they would completely rip that song to pieces and bring it back in a different form.
Yeah. No, very important band.
Yeah. DC Lee is going to be on the show probably in January. And
wow.
What are your thoughts on her?
Great. Very important. Been around, done a load of stuff, knows what she's doing. Yeah. Great. Send me a little note when she's going to be on, because I'd love to.
You can co-host it with me if you want.
Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. When are you going to do that?
TBD. She's working on a new album, trying to sort some dates out. But as soon as I know, I'll send you guys an email.
Okay. Well, let's keep in touch on that, because that could be brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be great.
Excellent.
All right. Well, listen, I've had you for over an hour. You answered all my extra questions. It's just it's so much fun to get your insight on these things. And I learned so much. And I know the audience was.
Yeah. Well, listen, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been fantastic chatting with you.
Yeah, likewise.
Especially as much as we were going to do it a while ago, and I wasn't so well, and there was a kind of moment where, there was other things going on. But no, very, very enjoyable. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. All right, stand by. Let me sign off. Yeah.
Say hi to John.
And John sends his regards again, and I'm going to make fun of him for not being able to play that song. All right, hang on one second. Let me sign off.